This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. Please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on the Apple Podcast Store or rating on Spotify, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening. Special thanks to Mike T for editing today's episode. On to today's episode. My guest today is Marla Taviano. Marla has written a book called Unbelieve, Poems on the Journey to Becoming a Heretic. As Marla herself describes the book, it is unusual, it's different kind of poetry, and it's a different kind of perspective on deconstruction. But I think it will definitely connect with you, as Marla was really dumping out her experience of deconstruction as it was happening in these poems in this book. One of the early poems in the book is entitled To You and Me, and it says, "If you're asking questions, having doubts, feeling anxious, even scared, I see you. I am you. This book is for both of us." That captures what the book is about. I loved my conversation with Marla. She has an amazing story to tell. Her personal story is fraught with intrigue. Near the end of our conversation, you hear us get down to it's about love and secular grace. And I really appreciate the work that Marla is doing with her book, Unbelieve. Here is Marla Taviano to tell her story. Marla Taviano, welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Thank you so much, David. I'm so happy to be here.
Fantastic. So Marla, you're an author. It looks like you've written a few Christian books until recently, and you've just recently written a book of poems called Unbelieve, Poems on the Journey to Becoming a Heretic. I love that title. Tell us just briefly about yourself and the book, and then we'll jump into your story after that.
Yeah, I have written some other books, and they were Christian books, and most of them have gone out of print, for which I am now very thankful.
Okay, all right.
I don't necessarily want people reading the things that I used to believe.
Okay.
So yeah, I won't share a whole lot now because it's a really big, long story. I'm interested to see what will come out of my mouth.
Yes.
How many of the things that I'll share with you and what direction this will take us. But yes, my newest book is called Unbelieve. And I love that you love the subtitle. Many people love the subtitle. I think it also turns a lot of people away. But I think by me just flat out calling myself a heretic on the front of the book, then it kind of takes away from people who want to come and accuse me of it and think
Right.
that holds any weight. I don't care.
Yes. Yeah. Just lean into it and embrace it. Yeah.
Go ahead and call me that, because I know by many, many people's definitions, I'm definitely in heretic territory, or total full-blown
And
heretic.
every group of believers are heretics to some other group of believers.
Absolutely. Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
Again, just briefly though, do you want to talk about like the poems in the book? Like what was the main theme there?
Yeah, what happened was when I started, quote, deconstructing my faith about 12 years ago now, I've always been a writer, so that was just naturally, I'm going to write about what's happening to me now. I mean, my other books are about marriage, sex, motherhood, pregnancy, all those things that I was going through. So I start writing and writing and writing. I mean, this is over a period of, a lot of years, but the problem is my mind was changing, my heart was changing, things were changing so fast, I couldn't keep up with it. Whereas in the past, I just believed the same set of things. So nothing
Right.
nothing was changing as I tried to write about it. It was simple. So I never gave up on the book, but I got tired of the book. I got irritated with the book. The things that I wrote 5 years ago, like, I just rolled my eyes and couldn't even stand the thought of them being in the book. So what happened was I turned it into poetry. So I
Okay.
am not a traditional poet. I mean, I was writing poems. I have poems from when I was 6 and 7 years old. So there's a poet inside of me.
Yeah. Well, clearly.
And yeah. And so I just took all of those things that I couldn't seem to put in in paragraphs and to make sense and a logical progression. And I just put them in little chunks of how I felt and how it went and back and forth. And it's a little bit of a mess. And that is resonating with people more than anything else, maybe just because I'm honest about it.
Right.
It doesn't fit in the format of a book. Here's the beginning, here's the end. Look at how this went. Um, and so I'm getting a lot of feedback on the what people have called either unpoetry or chunky poetry or whatever they want to call it. Um, that it worked. Like it worked. So it's very much the same book that I started out writing and very much not. Like a lot of that same thing. I put all my story in, but things that changed too much or bored me, I tossed those out. I put some it's unique. I've never read a book quite like it.
Okay.
And I love it. Yeah.
I'm sure we'll return to the theme of honesty. I feel like self-honesty is such a core part of the deconstruction process. It's what doesn't allow us to continue to fool ourselves
Oh, right. Yeah.
and forces us to face the truth. I'd like us to go back to the beginning a bit and let's hear about what faith tradition did you grow up in?
I grew up in a non-denominational church. I, I didn't know all the terms back then. Like
Sure.
I knew that they were Baptist. I went to a Grace Brethren church for a while, then we moved as a non-denominational church. The word evangelical was thrown around. Like so as I got older, I realized that I was an evangelical Christian.
Yeah.
Um, to me, that was the only kind of Christian, the only
Right.
real
That's
Christian.
right.
Like,
Yeah.
Catholics aren't Christians and whatever those other Lutherans
Yeah.
or
They're heretics.
Episcopalians. I don't know. Absolutely. And if they could just see the light and the truth. So yeah, that was my background. And I just saw somewhere recently, I think it was on Instagram, someone was talking about how the intensity of your religious experience is kind of matches the intensity of your deconstruction. And
Yeah.
I definitely feel that. So for anyone to ever accuse me of, oh, well, she must not have been saved or she must not have taken her faith seriously. Anyone who knew me at any point in my previous life wouldn't that's just there's no way. Like I was all in. That's all there was to life. Like that was the focus, the center. My faith was everything to me. I graduated as valedictorian of my high school class and snuck in a whole bunch of references. I was supposed to get the speech approved by the principal,
Yeah.
and I told him I hadn't written it yet, and that was true. And I wrote it like the night before, and basically witnessed to my public high school, from the podium. Which now looking back, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my
I think you officially get the title of evangelical. Yeah.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I earned it. I
That's right.
really earned it. So all of the and I don't know what your background is, how deep you were
Yeah.
into this.
Yeah, I'll give you the 30-second version.
Yeah, do
Yeah,
that.
so came to it late as a teenager, jumped into an Assemblies of God, so very Pentecostal.
Okay.
The grace theme began very early, but I was all in. I was 100%. I
Yeah.
was the type of person where I was very shy, but if we struck up a conversation, I would lead us to a discussion about Jesus. So
Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily, starting those conversations, but if the conversation started itself, I was going to tell you about Jesus.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So my parents, I mean, bless them, they are wonderful people. I did not grow up in an oppressive home, an abusive home, any of that. And
Yeah.
even in the book, there's a poem thanking my parents for never once. I don't remember one time them ever making a suggestion that as a girl I couldn't do whatever the heck I wanted to do with my life. I mean,
Good for
I
them.
played sports, I was smart, I baled hay for my grandpa. Like I just that whatever I wanted to do, I could do. So trying to give them credit or points for things since I was writing about a lot of other things
Yeah.
that I wasn't so grateful for. So they're definitely examples of godly people with the best of intentions and just wanted to do what was right. So they learned from a lot of people. So my love for books comes from both my mom and my dad, and they were constantly reading and learning. It just happened to be from people like Bill Gothard and James Dobson and Jerry Falwell and Tim LaHaye and all these
Right.
godly, quote, godly white men,
Yeah.
many of whom are like in scandals now or dead or whatever. But
Yeah.
um, so those were on my bookshelves. I was reading some of these books, and so it's just deeply, deeply ingrained in me that this was the correct way, the right way. This is how it was. And I lived in a very white community.
Mhm.
I remember a few years ago just looking up to see my little small town that has like 2,000 people in it.
Oh, wow.
And
That is small.
the demographics,
Yeah.
like there were there were like 2 black families maybe, and just so white. I learned that it was a sundown town recently, like
Mm.
where, black people couldn't even they weren't supposed to come after the sun went down
Wow.
because they could be in danger. So this is all I'm just not literally, but in a bubble. If anybody lives in a bubble, a Christian white bubble, it's me. So then I go from there to a so after I gave my graduation speech and made sure that the obligation to save
Yes.
everybody was
That's right. Yeah.
I did not leave my high school without this one last chance to make sure everyone knew I was a Christian. I went to a Christian college, and this college, believe it or not, was even whiter and stricter and
Yeah. I can
more
believe that.
conservative than, than my hometown.
Yeah.
So I went there, and I'm still just plugging along, doing all the right things. And it's funny because I'll hear a lot of my deconstructing friends say that they were always the ones pushing back. They were always asking questions. And I'm still working through that to try to figure out if I did that and how much I did of that because I rebelled in many, many ways. I pushed back against things. I stood up like
Yeah.
my teachers, I got in trouble a lot of times for talking back when I thought that they were wrong and I was right. My dad's nickname for me was Mouth because I just always had something to say.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that I disagreed or pushed back on things that had to do with Christianity. And I don't know if it's because in my heart I was convinced it was right and I thought that that's not something I want to push back on because that would be pushing back against God. I'm not sure.
I think we have this in common, right? I always
Okay.
saw myself as a reformer, right? It's that
Yeah.
I thought the church has missed the grace in the New Testament, that Jesus's message is about grace, and they've fallen prey to legalism and they just need to be reminded.
Yeah.
But the point of your story that really resonates with me is then, while feeling like you're a reformer and you have this point of view to get across to the church, you're ignoring all the problematic bits
Yeah.
and just kind of
Yeah.
taking those as read. Or I should say that I did.
Yeah, definitely. And so much of it I just did not know. Um, didn't have a clue. Like I just I and I read the Bible. Like I know there are a lot of people that have never read the Bible all the way through. I read the Bible through for the first time when I was 10. And then I read through all the time. I would do the Bible through read it through in a year where you check off a little bit like a psalm, part of the New Testament, a big chunk of the Old Testament. I can't count. I mean, I love checking off those boxes. So, I mean, so many times that I've read all the way through it. So I get through college, I get married, my husband and I meet at a church camp as counselors, another Christian deal. And it wasn't until I want to say 2009 um, that I just started. Like our church had this orphan home in Cambodia. And so they would have people go over there. Missions was always this huge thing to
Mm,
me. Like I
right.
loved I had very little exposure to other cultures. So I think I just imagined what it would be like it was kind of romantic and exotic to go to another place, and of course, these people are lost, so who's gonna tell them about Jesus?
Right.
So I would read missionary biographies, and, we'd had these mission conferences at our church where missionaries would come, and they would bring food and dress up like people from the culture, and you'd learn about things, and that was just fascinating to me. So our church had this orphan home in Cambodia they sponsored, and they were having people um, go take a trip over there. And I was like, okay, this is it. I want to go do this. Like, this will be amazing. I had gone to Japan to do my student teaching in college. So that was like my first taste of going somewhere. But again, this is a Christian school, an
Ah.
international Christian school in Japan.
Right, right.
I mean, even times when I tried, like you would think that I could have busted out of this, it was just somewhere else, and I stayed in it.
It really is a bubble, right? And
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
is pushing you, especially as a young person, the formative years of your life, everything is pushing you back in the bubble. And
yeah,
even these opportunities that seem like, oh, I'm going to see the world, it's just another aspect of the bubble.
yeah. It's so sad to me now. Thankfully, and this is jumping ahead, but thankfully my 3 children, um, lived a life outside the bubble,
Okay.
so that's good news.
Yes.
Good news for that. Anyway, so I tell my husband that I wanna go on this mission trip, and he said to me, Marla, there like the videos that you're watching that you're so excited about, there are white people pushing brown kids in swings, and you're paying $2,500 to go over there. Like, what is the point?
Ah.
Well, me being this good submissive wife, that was back in my submissive wife days. I was like, well, I'm just going to pray about this, that the Holy Spirit will convict him, because that's what I would do when I
Yes.
had great ideas that he didn't like. Um,
Yeah.
and so I did that. I did pray, and the Holy Spirit or whoever or whatever did convict him, and we did go.
Okay.
But around that time, that's when I started realizing that I read a book called The Hole in Our Gospel, and it was
I've read that.
talking about how that the gospel is traditionally presented as we're sinners, Jesus died on the cross, accept Jesus, you go to heaven. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's the gospel. And so then this man, Richard Stearns, is saying, but that's not good news for these children on the continent of Africa who are AIDS orphans and they're starving and all this. So
Mm,
where's the good news for them? He starts talking about poverty. He starts talking about 2,000 verses in the Bible that address poverty. And I'm like, hold up. I've read the Bible all these many times, but when people start talking about poverty, no, wait a minute. That's the Democrats, that's socialism, that's bad. Like that's my category for that. Like I just if you talk about this is we're not here to solve poverty. We're here to make sure people get saved. Like
yeah.
clearly it's a dichotomy. Like
Yeah.
you either care about the poverty or you care about their salvation. You can't care about both. Well, here's someone who cares about both and is saying that if you don't care about both, then your gospel isn't complete. And that messed with me. Like I was not I mean, I want to be good. I want to
Yeah.
be right. I want to do so if you're telling me that something's missing or messed up or I missed out on something or I read these verses and didn't obey them, like it just kind of was like, wow. So that's what started my snowball, my spiral, my slide down the hill,
I
whatever.
I I can imagine. I do like to just take a second to recognize the disparity between, a relatively straightforward reading of especially the New Testament, but the Old Testament as well. Like there's so much about the foreigner and the downtrodden, and the version of American evangelicalism that exists today is just, especially when you're out of the bubble, it
Yeah,
is just
yeah.
shocking to take that in and recognize that.
It is mind blowing. And that's been one of the hardest things for me to convey to people who were not inside
Hmm.
when they, and maybe I can find this poem really quick. This poem is called Four Letter Words. If you've never lived inside the bubble of evangelical Christianity, it might surprise you to find that LOVE and POOR were new and controversial subjects for me at age 35
Yeah.
because they were. Like, if someone talked about love, like, "We just need to love, we need more love." Love was like, "No, no, 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 no. This is not about love.
Right.
This is about Jesus. This
Yeah.
is about." Or and again, you talk about the poor. No, 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 no. Their salvation is what matters.
Mhm.
Not feed the poor, love the poor, and people bleeding heart liberals. You hear that? And
Yes.
that's it. And like you're saying, if you would actually read the Bible and go through, it's kind of like we're commanded to be bleeding heart
Yeah.
liberals. And
Yeah.
I don't mean like political views or whatever, but just so happens that those political views matched more closely. Like the Democrats were more likely to feed the poor, care for the poor, do the things that Jesus talked about, prophets talked about. I don't, I can't believe that I sat there for so long and had the Bible right in front of me. The audacity to let people in the pews have the Bible while you stand up there and tell them all this other stuff, and you think they're just going to believe you, and they do. Like I did, and yeah, so there's a little bit of bitterness still.
It's
It's
all good. It's all good.
it's on my heart.
I think one of the beauties of doing these interviews and the podcast is that someone else is listening to you vent and they're going,
Yeah.
"Wow, I feel exactly the same way." And so please don't hold back.
Well, someone actually, I think it's 2 or 3 days ago, sent me a message and said, I can't remember her exact words, but something to the effect of, "Marla, you gave me space to be pissed."
Yeah.
Like she said that's what specifically my book did for her, was she had been trying to hold back this anger, thinking that it was right or holy to not feel it, and that I gave her that space. And yeah, I mean, righteous anger is a whole thing.
Yes.
Like
Yeah. I've said a few times that I don't think I knew what righteous anger was as a Christian.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
And then and I'm an atheist, so as an atheist, especially over the last 6 years or so, I figured out what righteous anger feels like. So yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
The irony, right?
yes, exactly. I think I moved you off your storyline a bit. So you had gone to Cambodia as missionaries, and what was that experience like?
Well, that was just for 10 days. So we just went for 10 days and we visited the orphan home, and we met a woman who had this ministry that helped kids who were being trafficked over there. So that was like a brand new thing for
Oh
me
wow,
to hear that kids were being sold for sex. So I mean, I knew about prostitution.
yeah,
I think I might have heard a little bit about I don't know if I knew the word trafficking, but like adults being like abused. I don't know. But this was new to me. I did not know that this was happening. So we came back from that 10-day trip and our girls were pretty little. So this was 2010 and they were, I think, 9, 7, and 4 at the time. So they told us, we want to go with you to Cambodia the next time
uh
that you
huh,
go. And so that was kind of a thing. Like I really wanted to go back and I thought this would be great to take our girls like that. What an experience for them because we're playing with kids, we're doing all this stuff. And the whole time I'm there, I'm thinking my girls would love this.
yeah,
So we started raising money, not raising money. Like we had, well, speaking of raising money, like people gave us money to go on this mission trip, which now, and that's a whole other thing. But this time we were not going to ask people for money. We're going to earn the money ourselves. So we would do odd jobs. We'd save up things like all my book royalty money, which wasn't a ton, would go into this little pot thing. So that was July 2010. We got back from Cambodia and we're saving up money. We're so excited to go. And we finally have enough money
hmm
for 5 plane tickets to
wow,
Cambodia.
yeah,
And we're going to leave December 11th, 2011. So originally we were going to stay 2 weeks over the Christmas break because two of our girls were in school and one was actually homeschooled at the time. She had wanted to drop out of school and we let her. So,
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
um, so 2 weeks over Christmas was going to be the deal. Well, then we started thinking, this is a lot of money to go over there and do like, who cares if they miss a week of school? The
Yeah.
one was in kindergarten, like half day kindergarten, and she already knew how to read. So it was like, yeah, whatever. So we decided 3 weeks. Well, we extended it to 5 weeks.
Oh,
So
okay.
their teachers were absolutely cool with them missing 3 weeks of school to
Yeah.
go to Cambodia.
Yes. Okay.
Miss 3 weeks of kindergarten and fifth grade and go to another country.
Yeah.
And so that was the plan. Well, on October 29th, so 6 weeks before we were scheduled to fly out, we were at this harvest party at our church, which is what churches do instead of going trick or treating.
Yes.
My birthday's on Halloween, so I was always
Okay.
allowed to go trick or treating as a kid. I know a lot of people were not. Anyway, we're at this party. My husband is playing basketball. After after the basketball game is over, he comes over and he's just kind of like bending over and telling me he can't breathe very well.
Mm.
I tell him just sit in the van because we're passing out candy to the kids from our trunk. It's trunk or treat. Um, and he just keeps kind of whining about it. And he doesn't have like high pain tolerance. He whines about being sick. So I was like, dude, just get in the van. So then another friend comes over and he's like, I think I'm gonna call the I'm gonna call the ambulance or
Oh,
whatever. And
wow.
I'm like,
Okay.
oh my gosh, this is so, you people are so dramatic. Long story short, he had a massive heart attack.
Oh,
His
wow.
left anterior descending artery was 100% blocked.
Oh,
It's
no.
called the Widowmaker. When it was all said and done, they said 10 more minutes, he would have been gone.
Wow.
So our friend saved his life. Whew, um, and I knew that he was fine and all of that, and then the next devastation is, "Oh, we can't go to Cambodia." Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's no Western healthcare there. He can't whatever. So, at the end of his hospital stay, so I spent my birthday, in the hospital in a bed, like, woke up the morning of my birthday, walked down the hospital hallway, bought myself, um, a bagel and a coffee at
Yeah.
Tim Hortons.
Yeah.
Um, and bracing myself for this news from the doctor. So he's like, "You can't do this, no this for this long, no this, no this." And I'm like, "What about our trip to Cambodia in 6 weeks?" He's like, "Yeah, I think you should be fine." And I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
"What?"
Okay. All right.
Okay, you heard it here. The doctor said it's fine. So we did. We went.
Okay.
And toward the end of the trip, well, no, maybe 3 weeks into the trip, he was having chest pains and we thought he was having another heart
Oh,
attack
okay.
and went to this clinic, cost $35 for them to say that it was low blood sugar. He was fine. We get back in January of 2012. 2 weeks later, we're in the ER again with another
Oh, wow.
like chest
Okay.
pain, heart attack.
Yeah.
And the second or third ER visit, they told us, are you familiar with panic attacks?" And that's what it was. So for the next 3 years of our lives, he lost his job. We lost our house. He couldn't leave the bedroom.
Mm.
Panic attack after panic attack. B- bills piling up. It was a nightmare. And what made it even worse was that while we were in Cambodia, at the beginning of the new year, I think it was New Year's Day, we woke up and he said that he had this vision, that God gave him this vision that we were supposed to move to Cambodia and he was going to train young people to do web design and photography, which is what he did for a living.
Okay.
Now, the ironic thing is that I went to Cambodia hoping and praying that God would convince my husband that we should move to Cambodia because
Right.
that I had decided that was my dream and the girls were all on board. He did not want to do it. Well, after being there for 3 weeks and realizing, "Oh, well, this isn't exactly easy, and we're just only here for a couple weeks," I decided it was fine that he did not want to. Well, then he comes to me with this vision thing, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So that was our plan. When we came back, we were gonna move to Cambodia, pay off a little bit of remaining school debt, and there we would go.
Yeah.
Well, then all of this happened. So for 3 years, it was pretty much what in the heck is happening? Why is this happening? And it was a nightmare. Like,
Yeah.
I actually wrote an ebook about that, like, looking back. I don't I don't even know. Um, Long story short there, we moved to Cambodia in January of 2015.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So 3 years later, and again, he heard God tell him on a walk. These all these things looking back now, I don't know what I believe
Sure.
these days about God speaking to people. I've had people come to me and tell them that God told something about me, and I'm like, "Oh, hell no."
Yeah.
Oh, no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no. But these were real things to me at the time. They
Sure.
felt so whether it was just like I can't speak for him, but that's my husband, not God. But um, there were I believed in this stuff, so I don't know. So we we moved to Cambodia in January 2015. Now all going on in the meantime of all of this, we left the church that we had been going to that supported the orphan home, and we helped start a new church, which is a multi-ethnic church plant in our city. So our friend who is Black was the pastor of this church, and the goal was to get people of different races and ethnicities together because it's kind of a really challenging thing for Christians to do. Um, so that's what we were doing. These people, bless them, they got us through this whole heart attack thing, the panic attack things, the lose the job, the lose the house, all of that. We would not have survived without them. There's no way. And a lot of them were questioning things too, as I was. So I started out with the poverty piece. Well, now with this church, the race piece and the white supremacy and all that comes in. Trayvon Martin was killed during this time.
Mm.
We'd sit down together and talk about these things in groups. We had people leave the church because they didn't like all this talk about racism. It's like,
Yeah.
so why'd you join the the multi-ethnic church with a Black pastor if you don't want to talk about? And just there was just a lot of things that uh, I was being like my eyes were being opened to, and it was bit by bit by bit because once you start to uncover things, it
Yeah.
really is like this slippery slope or the unraveling or whatever people want to call it because you have to you can't, it's all connected, you can't stop. So moving to Cambodia, that didn't stop for me, like the whole thing. So, as far as a progression goes, like I sometimes think people take not that everybody starts with poverty and then to race and then to LGBTQ issues and feminism, whatever it is, but there's something, it just kind of goes along that. So the whole time we were in Cambodia, just constantly reading, learning, thinking, deciding things. And then we had a ministry that we worked for that they just really screwed us over, and then a church. And so we stopped going to church in the spring of 2017 while we were
Okay.
still in Cambodia and never went back. Um, to complicate matters, we moved back to the States in March 2020,
Oh,
smack dab in
wow.
the middle of a pandemic. We were literally on the last plane. Like people made jokes when you hear about the last plane out of Vietnam or whatever. We were
Yeah.
the last plane out of Siem Reap, Cambodia. I took a photo of the flight thing and it's like cancel, 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 cancel. There's ours. Cancel, cancel.
Wow.
I was
Yeah.
on the phone with Air Asia for literally hours and hours and hours on the internet waiting because something would get canceled and then they would keep my other flight, and it's like we can't get on that flight if you
Right.
didn't get us to that
You're
country.
right.
Like, so um and then just a few days before, my daughter and her Cambodian fiance found out that the US embassy closed and their visa interview was
Oh, no.
indefinitely postponed. So
Yeah.
we had to leave the two of them in Cambodia. My husband and I and our two other daughters came back. Everything's shut down. We're walking through the Seattle airport. It's completely dead. There's all these TVs are like, California's closing. It's closing. We're like, what it was just
Yeah.
I talk about, I mean, you expect there's going to be culture shock when you move back or whatever. You don't expect that the whole country
Yeah.
is going to be in shock.
A
Like we thought we
once in
would
a
come in.
lifetime event, it felt like. Yeah.
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 And so it was just, oh gosh. Okay. So we move. We had lived in Ohio all of our lives and decided to move back and start over in South Carolina. My sister and her husband lived here, and there was just a lot of toxic stuff up in Ohio. Plus, our girls had been gone for 5 years. They were kids when we left, teenagers when we came back, and trying to fit into our old life, it just didn't make a lot of sense. And cold Ohio winters, like we had not felt cold in in
Yeah.
5 years,
Right.
and we didn't think that that we could do that.
Yeah.
So that was all the stuff that played into our decision to move to South Carolina. Well, now here we are in a pandemic. We're living with my sister and her husband and their 4 kids, and 2 of our family is still stuck back in Cambodia. The president of the United States is passing all kinds of laws. He doesn't want anybody black or brown to come into the country. I'm
Yeah.
like beside myself with like fury and
Righteous
anyway,
anger again. Yes.
exactly. So this is another thing that in my past life, I would have been like, this is a God thing. My brother-in-law comes home to his home where I am living one day and says that the house that connects to their backyard, he saw the people moving out of it. His friend owns it and it's available to rent. And so we did not have a place to live. So and it's cheaper than any house that we had looked at. It's this 4-bedroom wonderful house, and my brother-in-law literally cut down a section of his fence, and there is now a path from our house to their like,
Yeah.
our back door to their back door.
Okay. Very cool.
What are the odds?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what are the chances? I don't know. So that's in May of 2020. In September of 2020, my husband goes up to Ohio to renew his driver's license, to see his family. He comes back, walks in the door, sends the kids out of the house, and tells me we're getting a divorce.
Oh, wow.
And okay.
Man.
In June, my daughter and her fiance made it to the States from Cambodia. They got married in our living room in August.
Okay.
And less than a month later, my husband says this. Now, people ask me, were you completely shocked? What happened? I'm not going to go into all of that except to say we had never once talked about divorce.
Right.
Not
Right.
ever. It wasn't threatened. It wasn't talked about. Nothing. Now, had he stopped talking to me for like 2.5 months before this, yes, there was like some switch that flipped. I don't know what it was. Was our marriage rocky over the past few years? Yeah, he was not a very nice person a lot of the time. And a lot of the time, I attributed it to his heart attack, his anxiety, his
Right.
panic attacks. Some stuff went on in his brain that changed him. Like it really, really did. But when we were in Cambodia, he was able to go, instead of staying in the bedroom, he would go off on his moto for hours, the whole day. Like he was just free. And so all I thought was God healed him. And I'm not going to
Right.
complain about this, whatever. Um, okay, so that's September. I, at the time, was making about $250 a week.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I had supported us a lot. We had people that supported us in Cambodia as quote missionaries. Um, he didn't have a job. He did not get a job until June. So he's like just barely into this job. He's starting to get a paycheck. So I'm going to back off a little bit. I'm going to work on my book now that I don't have to support
Right.
the family.
Yeah.
Well, then he leaves and takes his paycheck with him. And I've got an immigrant son-in-law and 3 daughters, none of whom can drive or get jobs
Oh,
or
wow.
anything
Yeah.
because they lived in Cambodia.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they don't. And so he left the day before our youngest started high school. Like she
Okay.
started as a ninth grader. She did virtual school. We were just talking about this yesterday, the girls and I, that we really did expect to come back and be it had this culture shock and we would be far behind and we wouldn't know how to fit in. And instead, the whole world turned upside down.
Right.
we know what it's like to Zoom and video people that we don't see because we lived on the other side of the world.
Yeah, yeah,
We know what it's like to learn online because that's what they did.
yeah.
We know what it's like even to wear masks. That's what you did in Cambodia when the road was dusty, or if you had a cough, you put a mask over your
It's
face so
culturally
that
appropriate. Yes.
exactly.
Yeah,
And so it was I still can't really wrap my mind around how that happened,
yeah,
like, that we were prepared
yeah.
for a global pandemic. We just really were, anyway, so in January of 2021, I find out that my husband had been cheating on me almost the
Oh,
whole
no.
entire time we were in Cambodia.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So thank you. And he ended up going back to Cambodia to be with this woman. And that's all I'm going to say about him unless it comes up again. But
Sure.
so he is out of the story. So I am a new single mom in a new state in the
Yeah.
middle of a pandemic, just coming back from Cambodia. Um, Scratch the book writing thing. I'm going to use my skills. And thank goodness, like, even though I did the whole stay-at-home mom, patriarchal Christian kind of thing or whatever, um, I was still writing, I was still speaking, I still had marketable skills. So, a friend of my sister's who had used to read my blog, she has a company that does writing, and she hired me to do some writing that led to other writing. So right now, I am A-okay. Like, I
Yeah.
am fine. I would love to just be writing my own stuff all the time. So far, it's it will come. That day
Yes.
will come. Um, but I'm good at what I do, and writing is still needed, and I can do it from my dining room
Yeah.
table slash desk. So we are good. The healing part is, yeah, there's just a lot of healing. So I decide, you know what? Damn it, I'm gonna write this book. Like,
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
get this book out there. And so, like I said, it's a different book than it would have been. At the end, it has a little bit about my husband leaving. And it's just it's it's my story. It's
Sure.
not the whole entire thing, and I still have a lot to unpack and unravel and figure out. But my overall feeling is hopeful, it's free, um, and yeah, this whole deconstructing thing that's
Yeah.
going on right now, that kinda that kinda threw me. I'm like, "You know what? If I had a minute to market my book,
I
there are,
know.
like, 60 million people out there."
I was just gonna say, I think this is pretty good
Yeah.
timing. So
Um, but ironically, I find myself not wanting to necessarily be in these spaces. Like,
mm,
it's not I haven't moved on. I have. I've moved on in many ways, but there's still something in my heart that sometimes it's I want to save the people that are still trapped in it, but what it really mostly is I know those people are still harming people.
yeah.
And the people they are harming, part of the obligation I feel toward them, loving my neighbor, honoring my neighbor, whatever that looks like, part of it has to be standing up against the harm that's still being done. And in many cases, like in mine, good, decent, nice person harming because I don't know.
Yes.
And since knowing and knowledge has always been my thing, and I was a teacher for 3 years, like, before I decided to be a writer, and so that's kind of where I'm at now,
Yeah.
that I will teach and share everything that I now know because I just didn't know. I mean, I wasn't someone that was throwing around racist slurs and being mean and what that wasn't me, but that doesn't mean I wasn't doing harm because of what I believed and who I was associating with. So yeah, like I was saying, I don't necessarily want to just hang out there and talk about why I don't believe this in the Bible. But I do want to stop the harm.
I think it was a shock for many of us other than, people of color who have been dealing with it for time immemorial. But I know for me, initially it was I had the same kind of reaction of, oh, maybe, and this is post deconversion for me, but like maybe the Christians, they're not seeing that there's racism inherent in
Mm,
the particular right wing political movement that's happening here. That maybe they just
yeah.
don't see that. So, in those early days, I was like, writing here and there, like maybe you should look at this. Like
Yeah.
there's a problem here. And it took a little while to recognize, no, this is a feature, not a bug. And that
Mhm.
was just utterly
Yeah.
shocking to me. And
Yes.
again, that's due to complete ignorance. I'm not saying that's a good
Yeah.
thing. That was my ignorance of not recognizing that this had always been true. And so justice is very difficult, right? To come to grips with our own ignorance and internal racism, and to acknowledge it in the people around us.
Yeah, and it is. It's ignorance. And that's kind of those are my people. I want the people who just don't know
Mhm.
to know, because I found that the people that really truly don't know, they're open to considering it. Like, if you tell them something
Yeah.
they didn't know, they might, but there are other people that are just so firmly entrenched in it, they're not gonna budge at all. Like, someone in my family disowned me. This is way back. I'm like, "Oh, honey, if you knew what what I was gonna do, like, I can't even believe the point they disowned me was
Yeah.
like, those are like
Right,
baby things
right.
that I was doing." Um, but people like them that are just so firm and will not budge and are not open to any kind of anything. But yeah, I'm just so thankful for that church that we went to
Yeah.
that opened my eyes, because it was a black friend who, when Trayvon Martin was killed, and she said on Facebook, "None of my white friends are talking about this, and it's so painful." And I'm like, "Talking about what?" And I had to
Yeah.
go Google it. Like, to up to that point, I cannot recall ever hearing about an unarmed black man or
Mm.
boy being shot by the police. That was not on my radar at all. And it's not like I was super in tune to the news. But I was talking to a friend recently who grew up in or near LA during the Rodney King incident. I never heard about that.
Yeah.
I was in high school,
Yeah.
did not hear one word about that. And it's like, oh my gosh, talk about living under a rock and just having no. Whew, anyway, so in 2017, I started, I got introduced to Bookstagram on Instagram. I didn't know that there were people that actually wrote Instagram posts about books. I'm like, "Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I love books." So it's called White Girl Learning, and I've been doing that for, like, over 4 years now, and it's all books that I'm reading by Black, Indigenous people of color. Because I realized that I had read hundreds, maybe thousands of books. I've been reading since I was 4 years old,
Sure.
never stopped, multiple books at a time, always reading. And I probably could count on one hand, two hands, how many of them were not written by white authors. And there's like this whole new world opened up to me. And that has been a space, unlike Facebook, where these are all my real life friends, majority white, Christian, do not want to hear what Marla is talking
Yeah.
about racism, do
Yes.
not
Yeah.
want to hear this. This was a space where, come in this space if you do want to hear what Black people are writing about, Indigenous people are writing about, Asian Americans, Latinx. Um, and so that has been like this beautiful space for me. But I read like a teensy tiny percentage of books now are by white people, because I just have a, like, it was so lopsided for so long. Like,
Yes.
my friend Robert on Twitter, he's talking about reading more black women. He's a black man, but saying that his reading has been so lopsided. And that's kind of how, like, I love that word, because anytime people fight back against something, oh, it's not fair, Black Lives Matter, or this or that, it's eh, slavery and all of that aside, how lopsided has everything been for so long? Do you realize how much we have to do? I'm
Yes.
like making my arms into this teeter totter thing to get it not lopsided.
Right.
Like, there's just in so many areas, um, whether it's for queer people or Muslims or black siblings, like whatever it is, it's lopsided. We have to, I mean,
Yeah.
in Christianity, whoo, like, white evangelical Christianity. I mean, and some things you can unlopside, and some things just throw them away. Like there's just
Yes. Yeah, back to a feature, not a bug. I do think that
yeah.
it's very, very problematic, the historical roots of specifically evangelicalism and how they've gained political power and things. So yeah.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about that. I have a book I just finished called Hijacking History, and it's all about the religious right and the Christian curriculum. So I was homeschooled for a few years. I actually bought one of my fourth grade textbook that I remember, my
Uh-huh.
history textbook, so I could go back and read through this. It is so I actually collect books that that were either on my shelves when I was growing up, or that I read when I was writing my marriage books, or all of these like horrible books. As kind of a project, like I'll get them from thrift stores or used bookstores online. Kind of like I want to learn more about this so I can fight it. But the things that I'm finding out, like about how evangelicals did not even care about abortion until they found out that they could use it for political power. Just so many things that I it was like I was lied to.
Yeah.
Like our history teachers are lying to us, pastors are lying, my husband was lying, everybody was lying. I wrote a poem about that in the book too.
Yeah.
Like I don't like injustice. I don't like being tricked. I don't like when people jump out and scare me. I don't like surprise parties. Like I want to know, like I want to know the truth. So kind of on a mission.
Man, I couldn't summarize that any better. Yes, exactly. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about the book. I think your opening poem is, if you're asking questions, having doubts, feeling anxious, even scared, I see you. I am you. This book is for both of us. I thought that was a great way to start. That is targeted exactly at this kind of audience. And I think so much of this process is so lonely. People,
Mm,
when they first begin to admit to themselves they're questioning, they feel like they're the only one who's ever done that, that they're failing God in some way or another. And of course they can't ask the people around them because they will just get
yeah.
judgment back. So there's so much of this is about finding each other.
Yeah, and I feel really lucky. And I don't know if it's because I've been so well connected online for a while, or if I have been so open about talking about this for so long. Like I've been saying the things that I don't share everything online, but I'm pretty open. Like once I change my mind about something, or once I start thinking about something, I put it out there. And so I've been doing it for a long time. I think I've just collected a ton of people over the years
Hmm.
that are going through the same thing. So when for people who are just starting out, um, they don't have that. Like they've never put themselves out there, so they don't know.
They don't know what the word deconstruction is, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it is because I thought to myself when I was writing this book, and again, I wrote a poem about it, that I thought, is there really another like room for one more book about someone deconstructing? And then when someone told me literally that day, Marla, you are the only person that I can talk to about this.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh gosh, I could pick like I have 150 people that I could say this to,
Yeah.
or go on deconstruction Twitter or wherever. Um, but yeah, so there are a lot of people that feel alone. And this book, I self-published this book, another long story short, but when my other 4 books were traditionally published, but it was before I was on the internet when I first got my first one published, and nobody knew about it. I didn't know how to promote, and what's a blog? What's a Facebook?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so they started going out of print. And so once you have a book go out of print, you try to get a publisher to publish something else of yours, and they're like, no. So it's like this big long thing. Anyway, so I know a lot of the publishing rules. I know I'm gonna publish this myself. We'll work back up towards someone publishing me or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and now I forget what I was gonna say about this. So I'm writing this book and I have to be the one that's telling people about it. Like there's no publisher helping me out. I don't have a launch team. This is kind of spur of the moment. Yeah, I'm doing this. I am just going for it. I don't care if it's imperfect, I'm going for it. The first the first book that I got back, the print was so tiny, it was like microscopic. You couldn't even read it. And so one of my friends got it. She's like, I can't read your book. So it's like all this trial and error. I'm like, you know what? This fits. This fits with my whole story. It's not, it's just a mess.
Yeah.
Um, but there are times when I'll get discouraged. I'm like, I cannot, there's so many people that need to read this book and I can't get the word out fast enough. I don't know if you know who Lisa Ling is.
Yeah.
She's on CNN.
Yeah.
Well, she and I struck up this online friendship over my White Girl Learning Instagram. Like she'll always comment, and I adored her when I was in high school. I'm like, I can't believe Lisa Ling
That's
is
awesome.
talking to me right now on the
Yeah. Yeah.
internet. Like I'm just starstruck. Anyway, I sent her a copy of my book. She posted a photo of herself with my book on
Oh,
Instagram.
that's
I
cool.
about died. This was
That's
like a
so
few
cool.
weeks ago. And I'm like, this is it. This is where everybody's going to hear about it. It's going to be amazing. I sold 2 copies. I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
This is what the conclusion that I have come to about this. Every day, without fail, someone messages me, emails me, comments something. This deep, deep message about my book. I'm talking deep. And I thought, you know what? If I'm serious about this and I really want to impact lives, then this is okay. This slow, deep, and if this book was flying off the shelves and I was getting all famous and everything, then I wouldn't be able to have these personal connections. Like I am personally connecting one on one with these people each day. And it's just really cool. So, no, I can't support myself right now with it, but I have a good job doing show notes for loan officers. So it's like,
Yeah.
yay.
I really resonate with that a lot. If I can just be personal for a second,
Yes, please do.
like when I went through deconversion, it was just prior to this wave, right? So it was 2015 for me,
Yeah.
and what existed then was the tail end of the new atheism. It was very
Okay.
very debate oriented, very
Yeah. Yeah.
hostile, aggressive, very male
Yeah.
dominated, very white dominated, what have you. And I thought, there's got to be more than this,
Mm,
And so started the podcast, talked about secular grace. Let's take what was good and let's put that in a secular context and let's care about each other. And that is such a saccharine, sweet message. It's hard to convey it without
yeah. Yeah.
just becoming sappy. And I knew that was not going to build an audience overnight,
Yeah.
and that I could double my audience if I just started doing debates with apologists. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
Or the other side, becoming a very very progressive Christian, and then really just announcing myself that way. So I was trying to walk this very narrow line. But the point I'm getting at is that has built very slowly. But just like you, not a week goes by I don't get an email from someone who
Yeah.
says, man, I really needed to hear this person's story or that person's story. And,
Yeah.
thank you for doing what you're doing. And so definitely, I think you're on to something. You're doing good work, literally.
Yeah.
And it's worth the time and the patience to make that happen.
Yeah. This is what I was made for. Like I was made for this. Like the writing, the reading, the books, the connection, like connecting people with things that they need, with knowledge that they don't have, with each other, with what like so I have this like hand clap thing that I do when I get all excited. My sister and I do it. And I was telling someone the other day that literally anytime I get a message like that,
Yeah.
or make one like have one book sale or whatever, I every time I do this, I'm like, you know what? I hope I always do this. I hope that I am always this excited about everything. Because there's just I went to this well back in my Christian speaking days. I was at a this conference, not a conference, it was a ladies retreat. And two things happened to me there this was I mean, we're talking 10 years ago maybe,
Yeah.
and these two things that women said to me have stuck with me for 10 years. And I don't remember a lot of other things. But the one, I was playing games with all the ladies and doing stuff. So I would speak like on it's like Friday to Sunday. So I spoke Friday night, then we played games, and I would speak a couple times on Saturday, and we do things, and then Sunday. And there was a woman, her name was Mary, and I could tell that she was kind of lonely, didn't have a lot of friends. She didn't come with a group of friends. She was kind of on her own. And so I just kind of buddied up with her and we
Hmm.
just played games and stuff. At the end, she handed me this folded up note and she had scrawled on there, Marla, you made me feel like somebody,
Oh,
Mary.
wow. Wow.
And I was like, that is it. Like, that's what I want to do. So, this whole thing with the harm that's being done to people who are made to feel like they don't fit in or they don't belong or they're not like, I want to make them feel like somebody because they are somebody. But it's not just that. Like, I have to get rid of the harm. Like, I can't let the harm still happen, but I just tell them that they're somebody.
Mm.
Like, I have to stop the harm. I have to change the laws. I have to get rid of the racism, whatever it is. Um, and then the second thing that someone told me, I was telling my story, like this is during this time, my husband had his panic attacks. He couldn't leave the house. I'm trying to go speak. His mom would have to come stay with him and the girls because he couldn't take care of the girls while I left to go do these speaking engagements. He wasn't working. So this is like our only money. So sometimes when I would get up to talk, I'm supposed to give inspirational talks to these Christian women
Yeah.
about whatever. And I would just blurt out my right now story, is what our
Right.
pastor
Right.
called it.
Yeah.
And that actually probably had more of an impact than any of the other Christian
Right.
crap I've been ever talking about.
Back to
So I,
honesty, right? Like
yeah,
people recognize
yeah.
honesty. Yeah.
Yes. So this woman, after I'm done talking, and my thing then was, we thought we were supposed to go to Cambodia, and now my husband lost his job. We lost our house. Like, what is happening? She comes up to me. She's got tears in her eyes, and she's like grabbing me. I would go through hell for a calling like yours.
Mm.
And I don't remember what I said to her, but what I thought was, okay, did you not just hear? I am going through hell and it sucks.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you think that you would go through hell for a calling like mine. But looking back now, I have been through a lot of hell.
Yeah.
And I think that, well, I know that I wouldn't be the same person. I wouldn't have the same experiences. Each message from someone, each book sale, each thing would not mean to me what it means to me if I had not gone through that. I mean, and this whole deconstruction thing, like the person that disowned me 5 years ago when my husband left me, she writes me this, and this is another poem. All of these things are poems.
Yes. Yeah.
But she sends me this letter, and I haven't heard from her in however many years. And she's like, I'm so sorry about Gabe, like about my husband leaving. And the poem says something like, I'm so sorry about Gabe. And I say, why? You divorced me first. Like,
Oof.
you,
Yeah.
so it's almost like each new thing that happens, I'm
Yeah.
like, deconstruction, that's nothing. You should try moving back to the United States during a pandemic. Then your husband leaves you and your daughter's stuck in Cambodia. I hope the drama is done for a
Yes.
bit. That is what I hope.
Yes.
Next week, two back-to-back events, my son-in-law's green card interview and my final divorce hearing. 17 months later, I'm still not divorced
Oh,
because
wow.
of the state of South Carolina. But and because of president number 45 and a pandemic, my son-in-law has been here since June 2020 and is not allowed to work. He's
Oh,
24 years old, is not allowed to work because he doesn't have his green card yet because of paperwork and because of stuff that the president passed and then the new president undid. If he would not have undone it, my son-in-law would have been shipped back to Cambodia. Like, those
oof.
are the absolute facts.
Mistakes. Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I am ready for some calm and so some no drama. But like you were saying before, and you alluded to Black people, people of color that have been going through, and I can't compare my experiences to that, but I feel like there's so many Christians that just go along in their happy little lives and nothing really rattles them and nothing really happens. And so they're not forced to question
Yeah.
things or
Oh, yeah.
consider things or think about things. And it's not like these terrible things that happened to me are what caused me to deconstruct. I actually like that part. Like I didn't deconstruct because my husband left me or because that, like none of that. My deconstruction, not like there's a noble way to deconstruct, but um mine came about largely because of my heart for people and having my eyes
Yeah.
opened to what was being done to other people.
Right.
It was not affecting me at the time. Um, it affected me later with my husband and then with my immigrant son-in-law and all of those things. But at the time, it was a genuine heart for other people, which hello, that's what we were taught. Like love
Yes.
God, love your neighbor. Well, then you start asking, is this loving to my neighbor? And then
That
people
is a dangerous
yeah.
question.
Well, love feels like hate. That's what this person who disowned me told me.
Ugh,
Marla,
yeah.
sometimes love feels like hate. And you know what? That
That's not
it
true.
shouldn't.
Yes.
It's not, then it's not love.
Yes.
Um and saying that the LGBTQ community has heard that love the sinner, hate the sin. The most loving thing I can do to you is tell you that you're going to hell so that you can repent or whatever. I'm done with all that. Like there's
Yeah.
so you are an atheist. I am not an atheist at this point. I don't know exactly
Yeah, sure.
what I am. But I just hold this book up for you. It's called Fierce Love by Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis. It
Mhm.
just came out not too long ago and she is amazing. But I actually bookmarked this little thing. She says, while I've retreated from some of what the church has taught, women are inferior, queer people are sinners, white people are predestined to rule the world, non Christians are doomed to hell, I've doubled down on my belief in love. It's my North Star.
Mm.
And this whole book is just about love, 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 love. So part of me, when I open the Bible, which I don't do very often these days, there's a lot of good stuff in there that I can say, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, sure. And the biggest thing being love God, love your neighbor as yourself. Like that pretty much nails it. Like love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. And then I have people telling me, well, I'm a wretched sinner, I'm blah, blah, blah. And it's again another poem. If that's how you look at yourself, if you keep calling yourself a wretched worm, don't deserve anything, I'm a piece of crap, then if you're loving your neighbor as you love yourself, well, then yeah, your neighbor is also a wretched sinner, worm,
Yeah.
piece of crap. Um, and for all the talk about, well, love is too wishy wishy, we have to talk about God. God, it says in the Bible, God is love. God equals
Mm.
love. God is love. Love is God. Like love, and so that's just really my filter now. Like, what is this loving? I don't really actually care what the Bible verse says about two men or whatever it says. I don't care. Is this loving? Like,
Right.
is it loving? And I don't mean the kind that feels like hate. I mean the kind that feels like how I would love myself. If I want to be in a relationship with a person that I love, then you can be in a relationship with a person that you love.
Yeah.
Not the same kind of person I love, the kind of person you want to love. Like, yeah.
Love recognizes the fullness of the other's humanity.
Yes,
And then
absolutely.
anything that is diminishing someone else's humanity is not love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Amen. Can we
Well,
say amen on
yes, yeah,
this
we
podcast?
can do that. Yeah. Marla, the book is Unbelieve, Poems on the Journey to Becoming a Heretic. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, but I do want to give you a second here to mention how can people get it? Any links that you have to blogs and things of that nature, anything you want to promote?
Yeah, right now, I self-publish this myself, and not to whine and cry about it, but my ex-husband is the one who is the techie person who used to do my website, do all this stuff. He left and took all that knowledge with him,
Ah,
and so
okay.
I'm like, "Ah, crap." So I figured out how to do it by myself on Amazon, and I have a whole problem with Amazon, but right now, this is what I could do.
Okay.
So it is available on Amazon, and I do not currently have a working blog or website. So you can find me. I'm on Instagram a lot, Marla Taviano, and White Girl Learning is also my other Instagram handle where I talk about all those books.
Okay.
And then I hang out on Twitter a lot, also Marla Taviano. Um, and yeah, you can people buy signed copies directly from me on Twitter,
Awesome.
Instagram. There's not a site you can go to right now. But yeah, Amazon is the place that it can be found right now.
Excellent. I will have links in the show notes to all of your social media there and to the book on Amazon.
Perfect.
Marla, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, David. This was really fun.
Final thoughts on the episode. As you can hear, Marla has just the right heart. The idea of asking, is this loving, is so obvious in many ways, and yet so often overlooked and missed. And dare I say, should be what Christians do first. There were so many things about Marla's story that I think were important. I want you to go and listen to the conversation again. I'm not going to be able to capture it all here. The fact that she recognizes and has been told by her readers that she's the only one they can talk to about their deconstruction is both saddening and heartening, in that it is sad that there are so few people that people feel safe with to talk to. And the flip side is those people are talking to someone these days. So deconstruction is happening whether the church wants it to happen or not. And people like Marla are safe people for those in the middle of that doubt, in the middle of deconstruction, to go to and talk to. I hope that this podcast is something similar. There were also many poignant moments in Marla's story, including obviously her husband cheating on her and the divorce. And just as painful, her speaking to Christians who were wanting to know about the divorce, and she had to say to them, "Why do you care? You divorced me first." Oh, that just really got to me, how deep that hurt is. And I'm sorry for Marla to have gone through that. And I'm so happy that Marla is a voice out there asking, is this loving? And challenging herself to be loving in the world. That is obviously secular grace, everything that I have been trying to communicate in this podcast, and I appreciate it so much in Marla. I want to thank Marla for being on the podcast and for sharing with us with such vulnerability and honesty. As we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, I think it is honesty that enables us to get through deconstruction, and maybe even the thing that leads us into it. But definitely the truth will set you free. Marla's book is called Unbelieve, Poems on the Journey to Becoming a Heretic. And I love the way she talks about kind of beating people to the punch. Before they could accuse her of being unorthodox, she just embraces the concept of being a heretic as she pours out the truth as she experienced it in her book. I highly recommend you pick this up. I think the poems are very poignant and represent her at various stages within deconstruction. There will be links in the show notes. Thank you, Marla, for being on the show. The Secular Grace thought of the week is, of course, inspired by Marla, and that is being a safe person for people to come and be vulnerable with you. This is the ultimate idea of secular grace, of a proactive love, of embracing our vulnerability and embracing others' vulnerability and the human need of being accepted. Marla is doing that for people who are in the middle of deconstruction and doubt, who feel like they can't tell anyone else. We can be that person for that same circumstance. We can be that person for an LGBTQ teen coming out. We can be that person for someone who is in the middle of grief. We can be that person for our best friends and to total strangers. And it is that human connection of being a safe place for people to talk that has a massive impact, has a huge impact on people's lives. I am seeing this happen in real time in our Facebook community, and I continue to be amazed at how everyone is connecting with one another. And I encourage you, as always, to come and join us. And remember that the Deconversion Anonymous community that's happening on Facebook, we often do a Tuesday evening recap of the show. I believe that Marla will be there this Tuesday, so if you would like to join, that'll be at 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. Join the private Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/deconversion. But I want us all to be proactive about being a safe place for people to come and be vulnerable. And they can only do that if they know that you aren't going to judge them, if you aren't going to criticize them, but you're going to let them talk, hear them out, and still see all of their humanity. And yes, actually still love them. We have a number of amazing episodes coming up. Next week is the 3-year anniversary of the podcast. My guest will be Ryan Mulkowski. Ryan is a secular humanist who is doing hospice work. That kind of completes the circle of so many things going on in my life right now. If you've been listening, you know. And Ryan is just an incredible person. And spoiler alert, I break down crying in this episode, and I think it's going to be a good one. I think you're going to enjoy that. That's coming up next week. We also have April LaJoy from Instagram fame who will be on, as well as Bethany from our community, and Luke Jansen from Recovering Evangelicals. So those episodes are coming up. Until then, my name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. Time for the footnotes. The beat is called Waves from Mackay Beats. Links will be in the show notes. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can promote it on your social media. You can subscribe to it in your favorite podcast application, and you can rate and review it on podchaser.com. You can also support the podcast by clicking on the affiliate links for books on gracefulatheist.com. If you have podcast production experience and you would like to participate with the podcast, please get in touch with me. Have you gone through a faith transition and do you need to tell your story? Reach out. If you are a creator or work in the deconstruction, deconversion, or secular humanism spaces and would like to be on the podcast, just ask. If you'd like to financially support the podcast, there's links in the show notes. To find me, you can Google Graceful Atheist, you can Google deconversion, you can Google secular grace, you can send me an email, gracefulatheist@gmail.com, or you can check out the website, gracefulatheist.com. My name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. This has been the Graceful Atheist Podcast.